Sometimes the people we trust the most teach us the hardest lessons, not with words, but with the quiet cruelty of their choices. You think you know your life, until one moment burns everything down. The day I discovered my husband's betrayal, the Arizona sun beat down mercilessly, turning the air into a shimmering haze above the cracked asphalt of our driveway. I stood in our cramped kitchen, the ancient window unit rattling desperately against the oppressive heat. Its cool air, barely reaching my sweat-dampened skin, the linoleum floor, sticky beneath my feet, seemed to grip my soles as if urging me not to move, not to face the reality glaring from my phone screen. I clutched the device so tightly. My knuckles turned white. The text message, undeniable proof of Daniel's infidelity. Can't wait to see you tonight, babe, same spot. It wasn't meant for me, his wife of 12 years. No, it was for her Madison, the bubbly dance instructor from the local studio. I'm Rachel Monroe. Just your average small-town Arizona girl, trying to make ends meet as a cashier at the Fresh Mart at 37. I've spent more than a third of my life married to Daniel, the overnight attendant at Prescott Freight Depot. We weren't rich, but we were happy, or so I thought. Our life was simple, dictated by the rhythms of our little town, where everyone knew everyone else's business. My days started early, waking up to the smell of coffee and the distant hum of tractors that dotted the farmland. I'd kiss Daniel goodbye as he stumbled in from his night shift, the scent of stale coffee and vending machine food lingering on his uniform. Then I'd head to the Fresh Mart, where I'd spend hours scanning groceries my hands, moving mechanically over cans of beans, boxes of cereal, and packages of meat. I'd chat with Mrs. Crowley about her grandkids, commiserate with Ben from the tire shop about the scorching weather, and sneak extra coupons to Angela, the single mom struggling to feed her 3 kids. Meanwhile, Daniel kept the depot secure from trespassers and the occasional hitchhiker. We had our routines, our favorite TV shows, our Sunday barbecues with the neighbors. The highlight of our week was often Friday night high school football games, where we'd sit in the rickety bleachers, cheering for the Crowley boy or the Jefferson twins. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours, or so I had believed. That's why the betrayal cut so deep. As I stood there in our kitchen, the smell of last night's fried chicken still lingering in the air, mingling with the scent of the wilting daisies I'd picked from our backyard. I felt my world crumbling around me. How long had this been going on? How many nights had he really been working late? The questions swirled in my mind, like the dust devils that danced across our drought-stricken fields, threatening to sweep away everything. I thought I knew everything about our life together. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw things. I wanted to call Daniel right then and there and unleash 12 years' worth of fury. But something stopped me. Maybe it was shock, or maybe it was a small, cunning voice in the back of my mind, whispering, "Wait, watch, plan." So instead of confronting him, I did the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I pretended everything was normal for weeks. I played the role of the unsuspecting wife perfectly. I packed Daniel's lunches, turkey, sandwiches with extra pickles, just the way he liked them. Each morning, I stood in the kitchen watching him walk away, wondering if he was really going to work or slipping into someone else's arms. The weight of silence pressed down on me so heavily I could barely breathe. At night, while he slept soundly beside me, I lay wide awake, eyes stinging with unshed tears, begging for sleep to come and steal away the ache in my chest. The lies I was living felt like thorns wrapped around my ribs, but I smiled through them. Because I had to. Because showing weakness meant surrender. And I wasn't ready to surrender. I kissed him goodbye before his night shifts, the stubble on his cheek scratching my lips. I listened to his stories about work with a smile plastered on my face, nodding at all the right moments. All the while my mind was racing, piecing together a plan that would make him regret ever looking at another woman. The internal conflict seethed at me. Constantly, there were moments when guilt would wash over me, as suffocating as the summer heat. Was I really going to destroy the life we'd built together? Memories of happier times would flash through my mind, our wedding day, with the whole town gathered in the little white church. The night we brought home our rescue dog Max. The way Daniel had held my hand through my father's funeral. But then I'd remember the text message. Imagine Daniel with Madison, and my resolve would harden once more. It was during one of our neighbors' backyard cookouts that inspiration struck. As I watched Daniel lovingly polish his prized possession, an old beat-up 1971 Dodge Charger he'd inherited from his father, I realized I had found my weapon. That car was more than just a vehicle to Daniel. It was a symbol of his masculinity, his independence, his very identity. The gleam in his eye as he buffed the faded red paint was the same look I used to see when he looked at me, and I was going to use it to bring his world crashing down around him. The plan was simple, but required patience. Every few days when Daniel was asleep or at work, I'd sneak out to the garage. The air was always thick with the smell of motor oil and old rubber mingling, with the sweet scent of honeysuckle that climbed the fence outside with trembling hands. I'd unscrew the gas cap and pour a small amount of sugar into the tank, not enough to cause immediate damage, but over time it would build up, clogging the fuel system and eventually destroying the engine. Each time I added the sugar, a battle raged within me. Part of me screamed to stop, to confess everything to Daniel and try to salvage our marriage. But another part, a darker part I barely recognized, urged me on. He betrayed you, it whispered. He deserves this. My hands trembled every time I twisted open the gas cap, my heart pounding so violently it felt like it might leap out of my chest. There were nights I stood frozen in the garage, the sugar bag in my hand, questioning everything. Who had I become? Was this truly justice or just vengeance in disguise? Guilt clawed at the edges of my sanity, wrapping itself around my thoughts like barbed wire. But then, always, came the image of that text. That smile I saw on his face when he thought I wasn't looking. That hurt drove me forward. I would whisper to myself, just a little more, just enough. The internal struggle was exhausting, leaving me drained and on edge. As the weeks passed, I noticed subtle changes. The Charger's engine started to sound rougher, a sickly rattle joining its usual purr. Daniel spent more time tinkering under the hood, his brow furrowed in confusion. I played the supportive wife, suggesting he take it to a mechanic, knowing full well that his pride would never allow it. I can fix her myself. He'd insist, grease smeared across his cheek, if only he knew the real reason behind his beloved car's decline. All the while I kept tabs on Daniel's affair. It wasn't hard in our small town, where gossip spread faster than wildfire. I'd overhear whispers at the supermarket, catch knowing glances between Daniel and Madison at community events. Once, while restocking tampons at work, I overheard two teenage girls giggling about how Mr. Monroe was always hanging around the dance studio. Each piece of evidence was like a knife twisting in my gut, but it also fueled my determination, strengthening my resolve to see my plan through to its bitter end. As I lay awake at night, listening to Daniel's steady breathing beside me, the scent of his familiar aftershave mixing with the lavender I sprinkled on our pillows, I'd imagine the moment when everything would come to a head. The anticipation was almost unbearable, a mix of dread and excitement churning in my stomach. I knew that when the time came, there would be no turning back our marriage. Our life together would be forever changed. But the voice in my head kept whispering, urging me on. He deserves this. It said, make him pay. Little did I know that the day of reckoning was fast approaching, and it would arrive in a way I never could have anticipated. As the Arizona summer dragged on, each day felt longer and more suffocating than the last. The air hung heavy with humidity, and the constant buzz of cicadas became the soundtrack to my silent rage. It was on one of these sweltering afternoons that my plan finally reached its boiling point. I was at work mechanically scanning items at my register when I overheard a conversation that made my blood run. Cold, two women, their carts full of popsicles and sunscreen, were gossiping in hushed tones. Did you hear about Daniel and Madison? One whispered, leaning in close. Apparently, they're planning a little getaway this weekend up to that new resort in Sedona. My hands froze over the barcode scanner, my heart pounding so loud I was sure everyone in the store could hear it. A weekend getaway. The audacity of it made me sick to my stomach. As if on autopilot, I finished my shift, my mind racing. The drive home was a blur of sun-baked streets and waving neighbors I barely registered. When I pulled into our driveway, I saw Daniel's Charger gleaming in the late afternoon sun, the sight of it once hung. A source of pride now filled me with a cold determination. I knew what I had to do. That night after Daniel left for his shift, I made my final trip to the garage, the familiar sense of oil and rubber mixed with the sweet sugar I'd been pouring into the gas tank for weeks. This time, though, I didn't hold back. I emptied an entire bag of sugar into the tank, my hands shaking with a mixture of anticipation and fear as I screwed the gas cap back on. A wave of doubt washed over me. Was I really going through with this? Was I ready to destroy not just the car, but our entire life together? For a moment I hesitated, my hand resting on the warm metal of the Charger's hood. But then I remembered the text messages, the whispered conversations, the lies. My resolve hardened once more. The next morning I woke up early, my stomach in knots. I heard Daniel in the garage cursing as he tried to start the Charger. The engine sputtered and coughed, refusing to turn over. I closed my eyes, steeling myself for what was to come. "Rachel." Daniel called from the garage, his voice tinged with frustration. "Can you come here for a sec?" I took a deep breath, plastered on a concerned expression, and walked out to meet him. The garage was already stifling in the early morning heat, the air thick with the acrid smell of burning oil. "What's wrong, honey?" I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, leaving a streak of grease across his forehead. "I don't know what's wrong with her," he said, gesturing to the Charger. "She won't start, and we're supposed to leave for Sedona in an hour." I felt a surge of bitter satisfaction. So the rumors were true. "Sedona?" I asked, my voice dripping with fake innocence. "I thought you were working this weekend." Daniel's face paled, his eyes darting away from mine. There's a security conference, last-minute thing, didn't I mention it?" I could see the panic in his eyes, the desperate attempt to maintain his lie. And in that moment, something cracked inside me. The man standing in front of me wasn't just a liar, he was a stranger. His voice, once comforting, now sounded hollow, rehearsed. My chest tightened, not from anger, but from the heartbreak of knowing he was still choosing deception, even now. The years we'd spent together, the love I thought we shared, it all felt cheapened, insulted by the clumsiness of his excuse. I stared at him, my expression calm, but inside, I was splintering. It was almost pitiful. Almost. "No," I said, coldly, dropping all pretense. "You didn't mention it. Just like you didn't mention Madison." The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. In that moment, I saw the realization dawn on his face. He knew that I knew everything. "Rachel, I can explain," he started, but I cut him off. "Save it," I snapped. "I know all about your little affair and your weekend getaway. It's not happening, not in this car anyway." Confusion mixed with the guilt on his face. "What do you mean?" I smiled then, a cold, humorless smile that felt foreign on my face. "I mean, Daniel, that your precious Charger isn't going anywhere. Not now, not ever again." As if on cue, there was a loud pop from under the hood, followed by a hiss of steam. The acrid smell of burnt sugar filled the air. Daniel's eyes widened in horror as he realized what I'd done. You destroyed my car," he whispered, his voice breaking. "And you destroyed our marriage," I shot back. "I'd say we're even." I turned on my heel, walking back into the house, leaving Daniel staring at his ruined car and the wreckage of our life together. As I closed the door behind me, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The lies, the pretending, the pain, it was all over. Now, I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be questions, explanations, probably a divorce. But for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. I had taken back control of my life, and no matter what happened next, I knew one thing for certain. I was finally free. The aftermath of my revelation unfolded like a slow-motion car crash. Neighbors peeked through curtains as raised voices echoed from our driveway. Daniel's face contorted with a mix of anger, shame, and disbelief as he alternated between examining his beloved Charger and pleading with me. I stood my ground, arms crossed, a storm of emotions raging within me. The Arizona heat seemed to intensify, matching the fiery confrontation playing out on our normally quiet street. "How could you do this?" Daniel's voice cracked, gesturing wildly at the smoking engine. "How could you? Would you?" I countered, my tone ice-cold despite the sweltering temperature. As the reality of the situation sank in, Daniel's demeanor shifted. His shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. "Rachel, please." "We can work this out," he mumbled, his eyes darting between me and the ruined car. But I was beyond reconciliation. Months of pent-up hurt and betrayal poured out of me in a torrent of words. I laid bare every suspicion, every lie I'd uncovered, every moment of doubt and pain I'd endured. The neighbors' curious gazes burned into my back, but I couldn't bring myself to care about their judgments anymore. Daniel's attempts at explanation fell flat, each excuse more pathetic than the last. As he fumbled for words, I saw him for what he truly was, a man who had taken our life together for granted, who had risked everything for fleeting moments of excitement with someone else. The sound of an approaching car cut through our heated exchange. A familiar red sedan pulled up and out stepped Madison, confusion evident on her face as she took in the scene before her. "Daniel, what's going on?" "I thought we were—" Her voice trailed off as she registered my presence and the tension in the air. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "Perfect timing," I said, my gaze shifting between my husband and his mistress. "Why don't you tell her, Daniel? Tell her how your weekend getaway plans just went up in smoke, literally." Madison's eyes widened as understanding dawned. She took a step back, her hand flying to her mouth. "I didn't know. I thought—" "Save it," I interrupted, holding up a hand. "I'm not interested in your excuses or explanations. You two deserve each other." With those parting words, I turned and walked back into the house, my head held high. The slam of the front door behind me felt like the closing of a chapter in my life. Inside, the silence was deafening. Family photos lining the walls now seemed like relics from another life. I moved through the rooms gathering essential items, clothes, important documents, my laptop. Each object I packed represented a step towards my new future, one without lies and betrayal. As I zipped up my suitcase, a soft whine caught my attention. Our dog Max sat in the doorway, his brown eyes filled with confusion and concern. I knelt beside him, running my fingers through his fur. "It's okay, boy," I murmured, fighting back tears. "We're going on a little trip, you and me." With Max by my side, I emerged from the house one last time. Daniel and Madison were engaged in a heated discussion by the still-smoking Charger, but they fell silent. As I approached, I handed Daniel a folded piece of paper, contact information for my lawyer. "I'll be in touch," I said simply, my voice steady despite the turmoil in my heart. As I loaded Max into my car, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. The woman staring back at me looked different, stronger, more determined. She was a woman who had faced betrayal and emerged victorious, who had taken control of her own story. I slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled away from the curb. In my rearview mirror, I watched as my old life grew smaller and smaller. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in months, I felt a spark of excitement about the future. As I drove out of town, the vast Arizona landscape sprawled before me, endless possibilities on the horizon. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing for certain. Wherever I ended up, it would be on my own terms. The open road beckoned, and with Max beside me and the wind in my hair, I answered its call. My revenge might have been served cold, but my future, it was burning bright with potential. As the miles rolled by, the familiar landscape of our small Arizona town gave way to open plains and endless sky. Max sat contentedly in the passenger seat, his head occasionally popping out the window to catch the breeze. The rhythm of the road became a soothing balm to my frayed nerves, each mile marker a step further from the life I'd left behind. I drove without a clear destination, letting instinct guide me. The sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. As twilight settled in, I found myself pulling into a small roadside motel, its neon vacancy sign flickering like a beacon in the growing darkness. The motel room was basic but clean, a far cry from the home I'd shared with Daniel. As I settled in for the night, the enormity of what I'd done finally hit me. Tears I'd held back for months flowed freely, a cathartic release of pent-up emotions. Max curled up beside me, offering silent comfort as I navigated this storm of feelings. Morning brought clarity and a sense of purpose. Over a mediocre cup of coffee from the motel's breakfast bar, I began to plan my next moves. First on the list, finding a place to stay. I couldn't keep drifting aimlessly. Max and I needed stability. I pulled out my phone, hesitating for a moment before dialing a number I hadn't called in years. The line rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Hello, Aunt Marla. It's Rachel. I need a favor." My aunt's surprised voice quickly turned warm and concerned. As I explained my situation, without hesitation, she offered me a place to stay in her home in Tucson. "As long as you need, honey," she assured me. "And bring that furry friend of yours too." With a destination in mind, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I checked out of the motel, loaded Max back into the car, and pointed us toward the desert foothills. The drive to Tucson took most of the day, but it gave me time to reflect and plan. I thought about the life I'd left behind, the routine, the familiarity, the comfort of it all. But I also remembered the pain, the betrayal, the slow erosion of trust. As challenging as this new chapter would be, I knew in my heart it was the right decision. Still, there were moments when doubt crept in, quiet but persistent. Some nights I'd lie in Aunt Marla's guest bed, listening to the desert wind rustling the trees outside, wondering if I truly belonged anywhere anymore. I hated feeling like a burden, even though Aunt Marla never made me feel that way. Watching her cook dinner for two, fold my laundry, or leave little notes by the coffee pot, it all filled me with a gratitude so sharp it almost hurt. There were times I caught myself thinking I'd failed. Failed at being a wife, at building a life, at keeping something worth holding on to. I kept those thoughts buried deep, smiling through the daylight. But inside I was still piecing together someone I hoped could feel whole again. Aunt Marla was waiting on her porch when I pulled up, her arms open wide. As I stepped into her embrace, the scent of her familiar perfume brought back memories of childhood summers spent under wide skies and dry mountain air. For the first time in days, I felt safe. "Welcome home, sugar," she said, giving me a squeeze before kneeling down to greet an excited Max. "Now, let's get you two settled in." Over the next few weeks, I began to rebuild my life piece by piece. Aunt Marla's spare room became a sanctuary, a place to heal and plan for the future. I found a job at a local bookstore, the quiet atmosphere a stark contrast to the bustling Fresh Mart I'd left behind. Evenings were spent on Aunt Marla's porch, watching the sunset over the desert horizon. We talked about everything and nothing, her sharing wisdom gained from years of life experience, me slowly opening up about my marriage and its painful end. "You know, Rachel," she said one evening, her eyes twinkling in the fading light, "sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is start over. And honey, you're one of the bravest people I know." Her words stayed with me, a mantra of sorts. As I navigated this new chapter, there were still challenges ahead. Divorce proceedings, dividing assets, facing the gossip that undoubtedly swirled back home. But with each passing day, I felt stronger, more sure of myself and my decisions. One morning, as I walked Max along the desert trail, the dry breeze tussling my hair, I realized something profound. The revenge I'd sought wasn't just about destroying Daniel's beloved car or exposing his infidelity. It was about reclaiming my life, my identity, my power to choose my own path. As I stood there, toes pressing into the warm earth, Max splashing happily in a puddle from last night's rare rain, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The future stretched out before me, as vast and full of possibility as the open desert sky. I didn't know exactly what it held, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to find out. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the crisp, sage-scented air, and smiled. This was more than just a new chapter, it was a whole new book, and I was the author. Whatever came next, I was ready to face it head-on, stronger and wiser than before. The trail wound back towards home, the breeze gently erasing Max's paw prints in the sand. As we turned to head back, I realized that's exactly what this fresh start was. A clean slate, a chance to leave my own unique mark on the world, unencumbered by the past. With renewed purpose, I walked toward Aunt Marla's house, ready to embrace whatever adventures lay ahead. The revenge was complete, but my story? It was just beginning. Months passed, and the desert wind became as familiar to me as the Arizona heat had once been. My days fell into a new rhythm, one of my own making. The bookstore job blossomed into a managerial position, my knack for organization and customer service quickly recognized. Aunt Marla's spare room evolved into my personal haven, decorated with desert stones and driftwood I'd collected on morning walks with Max. The walls, once bare, now showcased local artwork and photographs I'd taken of the Arizona sky's ever-changing moods. As autumn approached, bringing milder temperatures and the end of tourist season, I received an unexpected call. My lawyer's voice crackled through the line, informing me that the divorce was finalized. The news hit me with less impact than I'd anticipated. Instead of reopening old wounds, it felt like the final stitch in healing them. That evening, Aunt Marla and I celebrated with a fire pit in the backyard. As flames danced against the darkening sky, she raised her glass of sweet tea. To new beginnings, she toasted, her eyes twinkling with pride. And to unexpected blessings, I added, clinking my glass against hers. The following week brought another surprise. A publishing house representative visited the bookstore, scouting locations for a romance novelist's book signing. As we chatted, she mentioned their search for fresh voices in women's fiction. "You should give it a shot," she suggested, handing me her card. "Sometimes the best stories come from real-life experience." Her words sparked an idea. That night, I opened my laptop and began to type. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I poured out my story, not just of betrayal and revenge, but of resilience, self-discovery, and the courage to start anew. Weeks turned into months. As I balanced my day job with late-night writing sessions, Aunt Marla became my first reader, offering encouragement and honest feedback in equal measure. Max kept me company, curled at my feet as I refined my manuscript. Spring arrived, bringing with it a flurry of rejections from publishers, but with each no, my determination grew. I revised, rewrote, and persevered. Finally, on a warm May morning, an email arrived that changed everything. A small but reputable publishing house wanted my book. The day my novel hit shelves was surreal. Seeing my name on the cover, holding the weight of my experiences bound in paper and ink, filled me with a sense of accomplishment I'd never known before. The local bookstore hosted a launch event, and as I signed copies and chatted with readers, I realized I'd found my true calling. My story resonated more than I could have imagined. Letters poured in from women who'd faced similar struggles, thanking me for giving voice to their experiences. I was invited to speak at book clubs, women's groups, and even a few college campuses. As my second book took shape, I received an invitation to a writers' conference in Flagstaff. The irony wasn't lost on me, returning to the city that had once represented pain, now a jink, as a successful author sharing my journey. The conference bustled with energy, a melting pot of creative minds. During a coffee break, I bumped into a tall, bespectacled man juggling an overstuffed notebook and a precariously full mug. "Oh, I'm so sorry," he apologized, his warm brown eyes crinkling with embarrassment. "No harm done," I laughed, helping him gather a few escaped papers. We got to talking, and I learned he was a professor of literature at Northern Arizona University, attending the conference to support his students. His name was Matthew, and his genuine interest in my work and journey was refreshing. As the conference wound down, Matthew and I exchanged contact information, promising to keep in touch about potential speaking engagements at the university. On the flight back to Tucson, I pressed my forehead to the cool window and watched the mountains roll by beneath us. Just a year ago, I'd been broken, raw and uncertain, unsure of who I was without the man who betrayed me. Now I had carved out something of my own. Each chapter I wrote wasn't just a story on paper, it was a declaration. I survived. I rebuilt. I rose. The woman boarding this flight was not the same woman who drove away from a broken marriage. She was wiser, braver, and finally, whole. I reflected on how far I'd come. The woman who had driven away from her old life, heart shattered and future uncertain, was now returning home confident, successful, and open to new possibilities. Aunt Marla greeted me at the airport, Max wagging excitedly by her side. As we drove along the familiar desert road, the setting sun painted the sky in vibrant hues. "So how was Flagstaff?" Aunt Marla asked, a knowing smile playing on her lips. I grinned, thinking of engaging panel discussions, newfound writer friends, and a certain literature professor with kind eyes. "It was unexpectedly wonderful," I replied as we pulled into the driveway of what had become our shared home. I felt a sense of contentment wash over me. The journey hadn't been easy, but every twist and turn had led me here, to a life rich with purpose, creativity, and the promise of new adventures on the horizon. Stepping out of the car, I took a deep breath of desert air and smiled. The revenge that had once consumed me now felt like a distant memory. In its place stood a woman who had not just survived but thrived, authoring her own story, one page at a time. As summer faded into fall, my life continued to evolve in ways I never could have imagined. My second book, a novel exploring themes of friendship and self-discovery, was met with even greater acclaim than the first. I found myself juggling writing deadlines with speaking engagements, my calendar filling up faster than I could keep track. Amidst the whirlwind of my burgeoning career, Matthew and I had been exchanging emails and occasional phone calls. Our conversations, initially centered around literature and writing, gradually became more personal. There was an ease to our interactions that both excited and terrified me. One crisp October morning, as I sat on Aunt Marla's porch, sipping coffee and outlining my third book, my phone buzzed with a text from Matthew. "I'm presenting at a conference in Tucson next week. Would love to grab dinner if you're free." My heart skipped a beat as I read the message. I caught myself smiling, then hesitated. Was I ready for this? The wounds from my past had healed, but the scars remained. Aunt Marla, ever perceptive, noticed my conflicted expression. "What's got you all tied up in knots, sugar?" I showed her the text, explaining my mixed feelings. She listened patiently, then took my hand in hers. "Rachel, darling," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "you've come so far. Don't let fear of the past keep you from embracing the future. Sometimes you've got to leap and trust that you'll land on your feet." Her words resonated, cutting through my doubts. With a deep breath, I typed out a reply. "I'd love to. Let me know when you're in town." The week leading up to Matthew's visit was a blur of anticipation and nervous energy. I threw myself into my work, finishing the outline for my new book and coordinating with my publisher about upcoming promotions. Max seemed to sense my anxiety, sticking close by and offering comforting nuzzles. The evening of our dinner arrived, and as I got ready, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was a far cry from the broken, vengeful person I'd been just a couple of years ago. My eyes sparkled with confidence, and there was a strength in my posture that spoke of hard-won battles and personal growth. Matthew and I met at a small cafe nestled near the foothills. As soon as I saw him, my nerves calmed. His warm smile and genuine enthusiasm to see me put me at ease. We fell into conversation as naturally as if we'd known each other for years. Over plates of grilled vegetables and glasses of chilled white wine, we talked about everything. Our childhoods, our dreams, our fears. I found myself opening up about my past in a way I hadn't with anyone since Aunt Marla. Matthew listened without judgment, offering understanding and support. As the evening wore on, I realized something profound. The pain of my past no longer defined me. It was a chapter in my story, yes, but not the whole book. Here I was, laughing and sharing with someone new. My heart opened to possibilities I'd once thought lost forever. We walked along the trail after dinner, the moonlight casting a silvery glow on the sand and brush. Matthew's hand found mine, and I didn't pull away. Instead, I marveled at how right it felt. "Rachel," he said, stopping to face me. "I know we're taking this slow, and I respect that, but I want you to know, I think you're incredible. Your strength, your talent, your kindness, I've never met anyone quite like you." His words washed over me like a warm tide, filling me with a joy I'd almost forgotten existed. Standing there under the moonlit Arizona sky, I made a decision. I was ready to write the next chapter of my life, and I wanted Matthew to be part of it. I squeezed his hand and smiled. "I think you're pretty incredible too," I said softly. As we continued our walk, the sound of the wind in the mesquite trees a gentle backdrop. To our conversation, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The revenge that had once driven me now seemed like a distant memory, a stepping stone that had led me to this moment. My journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited about where the path might lead. With my writing career flourishing, a supportive family in Aunt Marla and Max, and the possibility of new love on the horizon, I felt ready to embrace whatever adventures lay ahead. As Matthew and I parted ways that night, with plans to meet again soon, I drove home with a lightness in my heart. The stars twinkled brightly above, mirroring the hope that sparkled within me. I had survived the storm and emerged stronger, wiser, and open to the beautiful possibilities life had to offer. Tomorrow, I would wake up and continue writing my story, both on the page and in my life. And this time, it would be a tale of resilience, growth, and the courage to love again. Dear friend, there are moments in life when you feel like the world has gone silent, when betrayal cracks through the foundation of everything you believed in. In those moments, it's easy to feel broken, lost, or unworthy of happiness ever again. But what if I told you that your greatest power lies not in avoiding pain, but in how you rise after it? This story is more than a tale of heartbreak or revenge. It's a journey through the fire, one that forges strength not through force, but through understanding, reflection, and choice. As the Stoics remind us, it's not what happens to you but how you react to it that matters. Rachel didn't just survive, she transformed. Her pain became her purpose. Her scars became the ink with which she rewrote her life. She didn't seek justice in fury, but in reclaiming her narrative, page by page, step by step. And through it all, she rediscovered something many of us forget: that healing is not weakness. It is the bravest thing we can do. So, dear friend, if you've ever been hurt, doubted your worth, or feared starting over, this story is for you. Remember, the chapters ahead have not been written yet. And you hold the pen. If this story moved you in any way, please don't leave quietly. Like the video, share it with someone who needs a reminder of their strength, and hit that subscribe button so we can keep telling stories that heal and inspire. You matter, and your story does too.